What's on your radar, Briahna?
Well, Robbie, just days after Congress voted to extend FISA, we're already seeing how it's being deployed to infringe upon the constitutional rights of American citizens. The first target won't surprise you. First, a quick recap. FISA, or the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, allows the government to engage in mass warrantless surveillance of communications, including phone calls, emails, text messages, and other types of electronic methods. Technically, Section 702 can only be used to spy on foreign targets, but in practice, intelligence agencies and the FBI have been able to backdoor searches on Americans by applying selective search terms to an enormous database of communications it has already collected legally through Section 702 of FISA. Communications from Americans that have been caught up as part of the searches on foreign parties. The FISA court already found this practice to constitute government overreach in a case last year. The FBI was found to have abused its surveillance authority to investigate both Black Lives Matter protesters and January 6th connected individuals. Now, FISA Section 702 was set to expire at the end of 2023, but the Senate voted 60-34 to reauthorize the Surveillance Act after the House passed the bill 273 to 174 along bipartisan lines. Now, recall that Trump-aligned Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene were furious over this, going so far as to threaten Mike Johnson's speakership gavel over this vote. What is the difference, Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted, between Speaker Johnson and Speaker Nancy Pelosi? But despite the fact that that Trump blessed the vote after initially saying that Republicans should, quote, kill FISA, Donald Trump is now affirming that Johnson is a very good person who did what he had to do given the slim majorities in the House. Indeed, there seems to be no accountability for the bipartisan betrayal of American Fourth Amendment rights on either side of the aisle. The New York Times published a guest editorial by Bush National Security Advisor Matthew Waxman and Adam Klein, compelling us to believe that government surveillance keeps us safe. The same rationale used by Mike Johnson to justify his flip-flop on the issue. And now, just a little over a week after the FISA reauthorization was signed into law, that premise has been disproven in the most dystopian of ways. FISA has been repeatedly and routinely used to spy on American citizens, including protesters. And it probably will not shock you to learn that in advance of the FISA vote, numerous American, Jewish, and pro-Israel organizations urged Congress to reauthorize FISA for the purpose of spying on foreign involvement in domestic anti-Semitic events. According to recent reporting from the American Prospect, the letter cited the alleged rise of anti-Semitism since October 7th and makes, quote, unfounded connections to foreign threats inside the U.S. as justification for warrantless spying on American citizens. Republican Ohio Representative Mike Turner advocated for FISA reauthorization on the basis that New York anti-war protests had links to Hamas, applying that their communications should be tapped. One of the signatories of the letter, the Anti-Defamation League, has been so open about characterizing any criticism of Israel or Zionism as anti-Semitic that CNN's national security analyst says she can no longer rely on ADL data monitoring anti-Semitism because CEO Jonathan Greenblatt was, quote, no longer able to define it in a way that allowed for important disagreement. She cited Greenblatt's retweets just yesterday about how student anti-war protests were pro-Hamas encampments, and said that as a result, she'll have to rely on FBI data instead. Greenblatt has also accused student protesters of being Iranian proxies in a recent MSNBC appearance, without evidence, of course. Now, the Anti-Defamation League that successfully advocated for, quote, more severe crackdown by law enforcement against campus encampments, according to the American Prospect, seems to have gotten what it wanted. It should be easy to see how this works. FISA and other violative arms of the national security apparatus are justified by their supporters on the grounds of alleged national security threats. If FISA can't be rationalized without a security threat, then you have to guarantee there's a security threat, even if it's manufactured. That's how we get false flag reports of attacks on Jewish students, like the now infamous flagpole eye stabbing incident, or anti-Semitic epithets being screamed as provocations by pro-Israel supporters. It's how we got former Harvard President Larry Summers arguing that the Palestinian flag in and of itself, quote, connotes anti-Semitic terror, and why kids praying together on campus were described as Sharia by Megyn Kelly earlier this week. Greenblatt's Iranian-linked co-eds serve the same purpose as weapons of mass destruction once did. The claim justifies violence against innocent Arabs. And if every criticism of Israel, a foreign country, is rendered anti-Semitism by our government's redefinition campaign, then there's no limit to what can be justified in the name of Israel. Just this week, protecting Israel from criticism for its ethnic cleansing campaign against Gaza has justified the tasing, violent assault, and arrest of hundreds of college students and their professors legally and peacefully engaging in constitutionally protected speech. Now, the prospect warns an American student or faculty member who communicates with family or friends in another country could see their communications captured via Section 702 and monitored by the government. And the authoritarian infringement on our constitutional rights doesn't end there. 21 Democrats, most of whom aren't even from New York, are trying to intimidate Columbia University into infringing on the free assembly of its students by weaponizing the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Saying that protesting an ethnic cleansing campaign being executed by a foreign government is equivalent to threatening Jewish students on the basis of their ethnic or religious identity. As Glenn Greenwald put it, Democratic members of Congress have long been arguing that any ideas they call hate speech and that they claim make others feel unsafe should be banned from campus. They're doing it again to protect Israel. The difference is many on the right are 100% on board with them. And he's right. Republicans are in lockstep with Democrats on this. Listen to Robert O'Brien, Trump's national security advisor, who could easily be part of a new Trump administration, describe student protests against the mass slaughter of tens of thousands of Palestinians, 2/3 of whom, I would remind you, are women and children.
I thought, this is what my Jewish friends are going through every day. So if you're a student and you wear a kippah on campus, people are citing them with vile, horrible things at you. It's not about Israel policy. It's about rank anti-Semitism and hatred of Jews. And it's the oldest prejudice. And somehow that's become legitimate. That's become normalized, that it's okay to hate Jews. And there's something very wrong with our country when that's happening on our college campuses and on our streets in New York and LA. And it's heartbreaking as an American to see that.
I call this the Hitler Youth because that's exactly what it is. And we've had the Hitler Youth before. There have been books written about the Third Reich and what happened on our universities and colleges.
A whopping 81% of voters under 34 disapprove of Israel's war on Gaza. 81%. Only 19% do approve. If criticizing Israel makes you Hitler Youth, then an entire generation, I guess, is the Third Reich, including the Jewish students who have been instrumental to these protests and who organized a literal Passover Seder on Columbia's campus, like, how Nazis like to do. Maybe we should listen to Jewish students and professors like Susan Bernofsky about whether they feel unsafe.
I do not feel that this project is anti-Semitic in any way. I do feel that the students are highly critical of Israeli politics, and I do not believe that that is inherently anti-Semitic at all.
Indifferent to what Americans think, Bibi Netanyahu took a break from domestic protests against him failing to prioritize hostage relief to interfere with American politics. Let's listen to, again, a foreign leader dictating to American universities how they should or shouldn't protect our First Amendment rights that we are granted in our Constitution.
What's happening on America's college campuses is horrific. Anti-Semitic mobs have taken over leading universities. They call for the annihilation of Israel. They attack Jewish students. They attack Jewish faculty. This is reminiscent of what happened in German universities in the 1930s. It's unconscionable. It has to be stopped. It has to be condemned, and condemned unequivocally. But that's not what happened. The response of several university presidents was shameful. Now, fortunately, state, local, federal officials, many of them have responded differently, but there has to be more. More has to be done. It has to be done not only because they attack Israel, that's bad enough. Not only because they want to kill Jews wherever they are, that's bad enough. It's also, when you listen to them, it's also because they say not only death to Israel, death to the Jews, but death to America. And this tells us that there's an anti-Semitic surge here that has terrible consequences.
No one said death to Israel, death to Jews, and death to America. That's a blatant attempt to try to conflate your interests with his. Once you hear that, the similarities between Israel's talking points and the talking points of American elected officials seems hauntingly similar. It begs the question, whose interests exactly are our Congress members looking out for? When American kids are being body slammed to the ground and having snipers take aim at them in defense of Israel, when the surveillance state is empowered via FISA to spy on American communications without a warrant, the question ceases to be, does Israel have a right to defend itself? And becomes, do Americans still have the protection of the Bill of Rights in our own land? We call this from the beginning. It's part of my critique on how certain kinds of investigative reports like the Twitter files have been framed. Historically, in America, the left has always been an early and significant target of these kinds of attacks. Any liberals who were not paying attention to the importance of investigations like the Twitter files because they bought into it being a partisan agenda were wrong. People who have chosen to ignore legal efforts to bar the right to protest, as just happened in 3 southeastern states. Anybody who has been ignoring that several states have tried to force you to not be able to get a government contract unless you disavow BDS, infringing on your ability to participate in a protest movement, which again is your First Amendment right. All of these things have been accumulating over time. Rising prison sentences and penalties for people who are engaging in nonviolent protests. All of this has been gearing up. The funding of Cop City and the hand over fist increased funding of police departments following the murder of George Floyd. All of this is a steady infringement on Americans' rights to do what we thought were foundational principles. And we're seeing the justification loud and clear. People are screaming from the rooftop. Why do we have to ban Twitter? Because the kids are seeing too much violence. Sorry, TikTok, you're right, sorry. Kids are seeing too much violence on social media coming out of Gaza, and it's causing them to have a negative impression of the Israeli government. And what are we willing to do? What are our government leaders willing to do to prevent us from forming those organic negative opinions? Ban an entire social media app, conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism and a congressional mandate, and on down the list. And now we're seeing how FISA is being deployed to target protesters, just like it was used to spy on people connected to January 6th, just like it was used to spy on people connected to the Black Lives Matter protests. And now here we go with people protesting.
Well, yeah, and I'm glad that people on your side are paying attention to this, and many have been paying attention to it all along. I've been warning, specifically with the Anti-Defamation League. I've been writing for Reason Magazine about how they inflate their statistics with the goal of demonizing. For a long time, it was people on the right. During the Trump presidency, there was headline after headline about how anti-Semitism had spiked in American schools because of Trump, the Trump effect. And that was all sourced to ADL statistics. And when I looked at them closely, they were counting not that actually assaults had gone down, violence had gone down. What they were counting was death threats that had spiked incredibly because one deranged Israeli teenager had made a series of bomb threats to American schools. And so this is so much for the Trump, this is caused by Donald Trump. That's why when the ADLU started interfering in Twitter's business and trying to extort advertisers and say there's all this hate and anti-Semitism on the platform and you gotta persuade Elon to do something about it or you shouldn't advertise on it, I was I was doubtful of that because I was used to reading statistics from them, from the Southern Poverty Law Center and so on, who have activist organizations that take in money, that get money from people based on a perception that hate is always rising in America and that it's the right's fault. Now they're doing the same thing with left-wing speech
Yeah,
on college campuses.
I agree.
And the weaponization of identity politics, and it should be prevented.
Absolutely. And you know that I made my bones writing as an early journalist on this exact issue, the weaponization of identity politics. And I agree overwhelmingly. The left has never been a friend of the ADL, precisely for these reasons. The Elon Musk example was a little counter example because it wasn't just the ADL who was raising some of these concerns. Just yesterday, Elon Musk got pushback for retweeting a Holocaust denier a couple of times. So it's his own personal behavior that I think has gotten him in hot water, who he chooses to respond to, the kind of content he chooses to retweet, the kinds of people that he's making executive decisions about who to let on the app and who to ban, and being really inconsistent as he administers policies in a way that seems to reflect his own personal politics. I think you can make a critique of Elon Musk and what's going on in the app, and you should make a critique of Elon Musk and what's going on in the app without referencing the ADL. I thought it was really remarkable that the one journalist that I referenced, who seems, I think, sympathetic, frankly, to the politics, or maybe I shouldn't say that, but she seemed almost begrudging in her tweet saying, like, I don't want to not use the ADL anymore. But you have basically, Jonathan Greenblatt, the CEO, has been so openly irrational about what he was willing to characterize as anti-Semitism, that it has undermined the credibility of the database in the first instance.
Right. I'm taking issue with that not use them anymore part. I'm saying there were problems, and there were problems were evident with them for years and years and years. And people on the left have recognized that, as I'm saying. But it's like now it's like, oh, well, now because they're...
No, but the point I'm making is that a centrist-seeming reporter it's gotten so bad that there has been an escalation. Like what the left might have seen because we were the targets of these kinds of things in the past, or what the right might have seen because they were the targets about these kinds of things. I'm speaking to an escalation that's making the center even realize that there is just no credibility here when you're calling the majority of college kids in America. Many of the viewers who are watching right now have kids that are somewhere between teenage, somewhere between the ages of 15 and 22. They are occupying these campuses or about to go to these campuses in the next few years, or certainly in the age demographic group that suggests 81% of whom, or whatever I just said, 80% of whom disapprove of what's going on in Gaza and Joe Biden's handling of this war. Jonathan Greenblatt looks at those people and says, you're Hamas. 81% of people under the age of 34 in America, or age of 35 in America, are Hamas. This is the position that Jonathan Greenblatt and the ADL are taking. And it's a position that has been reflected by so many people in our Congress, people like John Fetterman, people like Mike Johnson, who visited Columbia's campus and was met with a chorus of boos as he tried to talk down to students and tell them they didn't have a right to peacefully assemble. And what's even more important than what is going on at any given college campus or what any individual pundit thinks here or there is the fact that the levers of state power are being deployed to restrict people's rights at this really politically hot button time. We're seeing the calls for the National Guard to be deployed to put down students who are doing group prayers in Harvard campus lawns and in Columbia and other colleges around the country. We're having snipers on roofs trained at America's children and youth at these college campuses. We're having warrantless surveillance programs being ratified with the express goal, according to all of the people I cited, of being able to track people who are involved in these kinds of protests. That is a really, really serious thing. And I hope that, to the extent that you're right, a lot of people have been sleeping on this issue. They start to wake up. This is not a right issue. These surveillance issues are not right issues. The Twitter files is not a right issue. They are an issue of rights.
Issues of rights.
That's
yes.
right.
Right? Not issue of conservative issue of rights.
That's
yes.
right.
More Rising right after this.